we've hit the 1 p.m. mark, so I think what we'll start to do is just introduce everybody in the chat now and start off with the agenda. So thank you everybody for taking the time to join us today, and welcome to a new edition of our Facebook Live, which is scaling your business as the economy reopens. On chat today, we have Patrick Chan, General Manager at Sezzle. So Sezzle is your buy now, pay later. It allows customers at checkout to split their payments into four with a timeline of 6 weeks, and it's interest-free. And Patrick will talk a little bit about the services that Sezzle provide and how they've really been able to revolutionize some of the online purchases for people. So as an example, if I wanted to buy $100 item online, I don't need to spend $100 at checkout. I can break that into four as long as the merchant works with Sezzle. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We also have today Fahad and Omar, co-founders at Gravid. Gravid Blankets is a phenomenal product that eShipper has been working with for the last couple of years, actually. So we started with a big Kickstarter campaign that they did, and we've been managing a couple of different brands that they've brought out since. Great guys, and they are happy to share some of the insights on their story, especially how their business really changed as COVID came in, and people started to purchase a lot more online. Having said that, if we can move to the agenda for the day. So we're going to touch on 4 or 5 different topics, and we really want to keep this as open-ended as possible. We love to see some questions come in so we can actually engage with you guys and answer your questions, but we have got a jam-packed agenda for you. We are going to be touching on some common concerns. So while we're looking forward to your questions, we've actually set up some FAQs that we feel really need answers right now. So one of the things that we really wanted to touch on with this topic was about thinking about how to reopen and adjust your business to the new normal. So Sezzle is going to talk to us a little bit about how to thrive in the new normal and what that means in terms of their business. And Fahad and Omar will touch a little bit about the anecdotes and examples through their life story and what's actually changed and what opportunities they found in e-commerce through this lockdown. We'll talk a little bit about some strategies that businesses should adopt and what successful businesses like Gravid Blankets have been adopting. We'll also talk a little bit about where Sezzle comes in. As a lot of businesses start to go online, how can you use some of their services to increase the number of sales and reduce the number of abandoned checkouts? There's been a lot of businesses pivoting recently. So we want to talk about some product categories and what's actually selling really well right now and what's declined big time. So me and Omar was speaking earlier about barbers and salons. I think Patrick, you and I talked about how it's the first time we've gelled our hair in 8 to 12 weeks since we actually have to be on camera. So there are some industries that are going to be exploding within the next few weeks. And there have been some industries that have just kind of gone completely down. So like someone buying suitcases and luggage, it's just not, it's a no-brainer. Nobody's going on holiday for a long time now. So we'll talk a little bit about the economy and what categories are doing well. We'll talk about some common concerns, and then we'll kind of touch on what shopping will look like in the new era. So with that all being said, we'll try and have some time for a live question and answer. But having said that, we are looking forward to some questions throughout the series, and as the questions come in, we may stop and just kind of answer those questions on the fly because it'll engage a lot more users and hopefully people will have follow-ups to that too. So to kind of get us started, what we've seen in the last 2 months is a real propulsion of businesses going into the digital age. Like if you were not online before, you are most likely thinking about going online now. And if you didn't purchase online before, like my dad, then you are now definitely going online. And whether it's him ordering me to go online and buy something for him, or him actually creating an account and actually starting to purchase online, one way or the other, everybody is starting to get their products sent to them via an online purchase. Where some people have struggled, others have excelled. And today, as we are here, we're going to be sharing a few real life stories of businesses that have excelled and how they excelled. We're starting to see a lot of retailers now in Canada being allowed to open up. Provinces have now opened up fully. I know the province of Ontario and Quebec are starting to open up their doors and allowing more and more people to gather at one time. We're seeing a lot of shift from people who used to be in retail now having a much better online presence. We know, people like the founder at Facebook have seen, their worth go up crazy, their stock prices go up crazy because more and more people are now using Facebook ads and digital ads and so on and so forth. And I think even people at home are now spending more money because they don't have the same outgoings as they used to have before, like, going clubbing, going to the pub, spending money on going out and actually doing things. They're more now at home and kind of buying online. So a real great opportunity for people to start thinking about how they work with this. And it is true, people are still afraid to leave the house. A lot of people are just not happy to get out the house because they don't know what's going to be around them or who's going to be around them. I think the last thing we want to touch on is the restrictions and the current restrictions that are in place and how these restrictions are slowly being relaxed. And how is that going to affect us all? How is that going to affect the economy? And where do we go from here? So, without further ado, Patrick, let's start with a couple of scenarios from your perspective. What are the
Sure.
general things that you're seeing today? And what are some of the specific action points that you would advise people to start thinking about as they adapt into this new normal and really want to thrive?
Sure. I mean, first of all, thanks for having me. It's good to be here, and thanks for everyone for joining. I'll start pretty high level, and then I'll drill down because I think it's important to define culture as well as talking about specific actions. And I'll also say I don't think anyone has the right answers because these are unprecedented times. And first and most importantly, I hope everyone that's listening and that you and your families are safe and healthy, and that we're all hanging in there. So I'll share what I've personally been thinking about as it relates to business. A few weeks ago, I was flipping TV channels because that's what we do now at home, watching TV and Netflix and whatnot. And I landed on I think it was National Geographic or it might have been Discovery, something like that. The topic for the show was something like the origins of humanity, and I felt like geeking out a little bit, so I tuned in, and it turned out to be really good. It was really interesting. The show talked about studies that related to the evolution of different human species through like multiple climate changes, availability of food, just a lot of changes over time. And the conclusion is that the single most defining characteristic, and I think like Smithsonian has studied this before, or at least they published it in our species, which is Homo sapiens, was what resulted in our survival over all of these years is the ability to adapt or adaptability, which I think is pretty relevant for what we're talking about today. So the winners coming out of COVID as the economy reopens will be the ones that can best and most quickly adapt to our new world. And a lot of us are thinking about what is this new world? How do we define it? And many of us are trying our best to predict it. But I think here's something to think about. So we hosted a webinar at Sezzle along with a guy named Jason Dorsey. He's an expert in generational behavior, and he has a firm called the Center for Generational Kinetics. We teamed up with them to do a study on Gen Z, millennials, and their relationship with money, credit, and payments. This was last week. And if anyone's interested in the results of that study, just DM me on LinkedIn or comment, and I'm happy to email it over to you. One thing that Jason said that really stuck out to me is that we always try to put people or individuals into groups by age, by gender, by location. But the reality is that people's behaviors, preferences, and emotions towards certain things are simply the result of their experiences up until that time. It's their normal. It's what they've always known. So a good example, it's funny, we talked about our parents before, is my parents. So pre-COVID, they never used FaceTime or WhatsApp video chat before. And because they were really paranoid about the security, the privacy, they thought somebody would be watching and whatnot. But then COVID hit, and we have a 1-year-old daughter at home. And since they weren't going to see her for a few months, because my mom is in a high risk category, we had to adapt. So we did a bunch of FaceTime calls, and now if I call them on the phone and it's not video, they're like, "What are you doing? I want to see Kaya," which is the name of our daughter. So their new normal for communication has changed, and how they assign value in the aspect of like communication, that's changed. There's less value now placed on security and more value placed on visual. So that brings me to my next point, which is for any business owners or leaders that are listening right now, and we're thinking about this every day at Sezzle. In order to operate well in this new normal, you need to really understand your stakeholders and their hierarchy of values and how that's changed because of COVID. Because as our economy starts to open up, we really need to understand, and this is all just kind of a fancy way of saying, what do people care about? We need to understand that in the context of our businesses. So a couple of examples that I can think of is pre-COVID. If you're running a bar or a restaurant or a club or whatever, and it may have been really advantageous to have the busiest, fullest establishment to create that hype. Post-COVID, that's changing. That's going to be different. The new thing people will value will probably be more space or distance. And of course, knowing that the establishment and the food or drinks are properly sanitized. So how do you design a really great customer experience around that? I love thinking about like cause effect type stuff, and would encourage all of you to do so in the context of your business. I think we're all pretty aligned that in general, less people will be going into an office once things open back up.
Absolutely.
If you operate a stall in a food court near a lot of offices, that's pretty concerning. But it's not like people are going to stop eating lunch. People will still need to eat lunch. So is there an opportunity for like a workday lunch meal kit? Is there like a community delivery service of some sort? I don't know, but we do know that there will be new opportunities post-COVID that didn't really exist. Can I give one more example?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So this is really cool. Of an example of adapting quickly. So our wedding anniversary was in May. Clearly, we weren't going to be going out for dinner, and both my wife and I, we've been really craving seafood. So I ended up ordering seafood to cook at home, which arrived at my house the next day after I ordered. The site I ordered from, just back in February, only sold to restaurants. They only did wholesale through phone and email. Then COVID hit, and within a few days, they were taking orders from individuals because they had to adapt their business, and they were taking orders over email on a spreadsheet. And that's how I found out about them, because my friend sent me on WhatsApp a spreadsheet. 2 weeks later, they were getting so many orders from individuals that they had to quickly spin up an e-commerce site. And a week after that, they had a fully functioning site, a direct-to-consumer business that didn't exist 3 weeks ago. So now it's going to be really interesting to see actually what happens after restaurants open and what they do, because it's pretty amazing what technology has enabled businesses like that to shift so quickly. And of course, working with companies like eShipper and everything else. So to summarize what I just said, be hyper adaptable and to be really good at that, you need to constantly be assessing and reassessing what your customers care about. Because what was important 3 months ago is different now, and the companies that do that really well, based on our external environment, while staying true to their core message or their core purpose, those are the ones that I believe will thrive when things open back up.
I think you touched on a lot of really good points there, because I think one of the things that we have to do as we adapt is to think about what our core competency is and what we're really, really good at, and then be able to partner up with people that can do everything else that is not in our control or we can't touch. So as an example, Gravid was in a position where they didn't touch their product in the sense of the fulfillment side. So when the shutdown happened, with a partner who was deemed to be a necessity or an essential business, their business just continued. They didn't worry about going into a warehouse and having to, take precaution and, for example, see if they were allowed to be there or not. And I think, just as a quick example, they're using Sezzle, they're using Shopify, they're using partners that know what they do really, really well. And I think when it comes to adapting and thinking about best practices, it's about really looking internally first and seeing what are you really good at, what do you have control over, and whatever you don't have control over, find people who can support you with that. So Having said that, I think one of the great stories that has come out is that, Gravid's been able to do a lot of things like touch people's lives and provide them with a lot of tools through their product sets to help them during these times. So, Fahad, Omar, maybe give us a little bit of a background as to your product, the story, and what you guys do and what you've been able to achieve during this time.
Absolutely. And Imtiaz, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with the eShipper team and with Sezzle. Thank you so much for inviting us to the Facebook Live. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So we have an interesting history, I think. So Gravid had started in early 2017, and it was right around the time that eShipper was starting out as well. So you guys had the separate company, but then we sort of scaled our business at the same time. And Omar and I's model has always been to keep our overhead really low. So even when we scale the business, we effectively, without even knowing it, we were adopting this work from home model. So we both work out of our home offices. We rarely travel much, and we manage as much as we can online through FaceTime chats, WhatsApp, and Zoom calls. So I feel like we had adopted this COVID lifestyle before it even was a lifestyle or a recognized lifestyle. And personally, I've always been a huge proponent of work from home, just working from home. Even when I used to work at downtown at various roles, I used to always commute as rarely as needed because I wanted to stay home and just I was more efficient with my time. So like personally, I'm really excited. Like obviously COVID's really bad and we worry about people, especially in the high risk category, but I'm excited to see this come full circle. It's kind of accelerated. I didn't think we'd be at this point until 2030. So I really like it. But yeah, to speak to our product specifically and why we think it's such a good fit right now. So for those of you who don't know, we run an online store. It's a Shopify store and it's gravid.ca. And it's weighted blankets. So it's essentially a blanket that's roughly 10% of your body weight. And when you put it on you, it calms you down, it relieves anxiety, and it helps you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. So it's basically a means of helping you relax and de-stress. And we also refer to it as a hug. It's like a proxy hug. So it feels like someone, a loving relative, is giving you a deep hug. So, taking our product, which we had launched in 2017, and we come to this moment where there's social distancing, people have a lot of anxiety and they can't get that loving embrace from their loved ones, from their family and friends. Our product suits this moment perfectly. And we take all of the work that we've done to scale our business up to this time, and we're prepared for the opportunity, and the opportunity was retail locations closing down or shuttering up, while online traffic is just soaring. And we've scaled our business to the point where we're ready to embrace the opportunity. And I'm being really optimistic about the situation, but it's a really great time for online entrepreneurs or any business who's transitioning to online business. So there's quite a few things that we did, and specifically in the marketing category and the branding. And Omar's got some really great points to bring up about that.
Fantastic. Thank you guys for sharing that.
eShipper, Sezzle, thanks for having us, and everyone who's joining us today as well. Really appreciate the opportunity. So one of the things we've found during this pandemic is a lot of the customers who are now shopping online on our store and on other online stores are people who have, like you guys mentioned, adapted. These are people who typically wouldn't shop online until this circumstance arose. And what we found is we've had to do a lot when it comes to marketing to alleviate a lot of the concerns. So when it comes to any sales and marketing, one of your jobs is to sort of handle any sort of concerns that the customer or prospective customer may have. So something Fahad and I have actually done during this time has been to put our faces behind the brand more. So rather than just being, just a website where you go online and you shop, we want to show that we are real people behind the business. We put our faces to it. We do a lot of email marketing to keep in touch with our customer base, and we record videos to actually show that there are people behind this company. And just as a customer would expect to have sort of a personal touch when they go into a retail location. They can now experience something like that through shopping on our Shopify store.
Do you think you've done anything different over the last 12 weeks that you didn't do before?
Yeah, absolutely. So so a lot of our time is invested in the nuances of digital marketing. So we invest a lot of money in driving traffic to our website and then trying to convert that traffic. As any of the aspiring or established online entrepreneurs on the chat right now know that you're looking closely at your cost of acquisition and how you can drive that down while scaling your business up. So when COVID came along, one of the big questions, like when the lockdown happened, was are you still shipping product? Are you open for business? And are you maintaining like sanitary conditions? Because I think we all sort of feel it when you receive like a package from Amazon or a delivery. If you're anything like me, you were leaving that box and maybe put it in your garage with gloves and letting it sit there for 48 hours or 72 hours until it sort of decontaminated. So what we did was getting back to driving traffic to sort of alleviate the anxieties that people had lurking, unanswered questions. We said in our Google ads specifically, because we drive a lot of traffic through Google ads, one of our ads was, hey, we are open during COVID. We're still maintaining next day delivery. So that was really important to get out there in front. That was one of those tactical nuances we had with our marketing. And then sort of on the other side, once people are on the website and, we might not specifically say it right up front, but then actually we do say it up front. Omar had actually put together a great video speaking to how we take care of the product and why is it safe to purchase from us. And I'll let him add some more color to that because that was a really big win for us.
Yeah, so something you had mentioned, Patrick, was the importance of keeping a close line of communication with your customers and then being able to quickly adapt. That's something we've actually done since the very beginning of our company. We've iterated our product multiple times, and every time it's been based off of the customer feedback we get. So when it comes to product iterations, we are constantly very closely monitoring the sorts of feedback we get from our customers, whether that's through chat, through email, and we use that to iterate the second version of our product, and now we're on the Gravid 3.0. But during the time of the pandemic, we were noticing an increased number of queries regarding sanitation at our warehouse, whether we're still shipping and fulfilling on a daily basis, and if people will still be able to receive their products, as they were before the pandemic. So we took all of that all of that feedback from our customers, and we actually used it to, as Fahad mentioned, create a video and just address everything directly. So I think from a marketing perspective, it's really important to know what your customers want to know, and then just make that information easily accessible to them, ideally proactively, so they don't even have to reach out to you necessarily to get that information. It's like, okay, this is what your customers want to know, and we're going to make sure that that information is very easily presented on our website.
So I think going back to the viewers and thinking about the topic at hand, which is how do I reopen my business and what are some of the things to think about? I think you hit the nail on the head when it came to communication. I think all three of you really touched on that point with adapting your communication, thinking about how to make yourself more human in essence, and how to really give your clients as much information at their fingertips without having for them to ask for that type of thing. Personalizing your brand with your faces, becoming more human. These are all things that people will now have to consider as the economy reopens. And some of the things that you guys have done really, really well, even in amidst lockdown and things like that. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and some of your stories. Let's move on to a few things around what people should be doing as we now get into this new norm. So we know that businesses are going to be moving from offline to online. There's a huge campaign by the city of Toronto that was kicked off about 4 weeks ago by John Tory. And that was called Shop Here, where they had 3,000 businesses apply to go online. These are retail businesses, artists, and so on that are in the core of Toronto downtown. And I believe Google then invested $100 million into that program. And I believe another $50-60 million was actually provided yesterday or approved yesterday so that this program can go across the country. Now we're seeing a lot of businesses coming in and obviously having those really startup questions about how the e-commerce world is changing, how the growth is there, and how they can just jump into the movements. One of the big things that Shopify enabled recently was curbside pickup. And I'm sure a lot of businesses that are listening today have been through that point where, you know, they've ordered something from Home Depot or they've ordered something from Canadian Tire, a restaurant, whatever it is, and they've been told you can't come in to pick up your package. You've got to wait outside and we'll give it to you at the curbside. So curbside pickup is becoming a huge part. As online businesses thrive, returns thrive, right? And everybody has to think about how their returns is going to change, relooking and kind of adopting the fact that things are going to become a little bit heavier on the return side as more and more people are not feeling and touching their product at a retail store. And then we want to touch a little bit on Gravid and what they've adopted outside of the marketing side. So before we go any further, with those strategies in mind and those things to think about, let's go and kind of some of these questions. So some of the questions are really around product sets and what will work now and what won't. We'll touch on those down the slides, as we have a few that are really going to be a few slides that are going to talk about industries that are good right now and what's the boom and what's temporary. One question here is, as online becomes so big, there's been a lot of issues with packages being delivered on time and delays and so on and so forth. So Gravid, how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, so Imtiaz, as you know, we work closely together every day, and to empathize with the carriers, I don't think anybody was anticipating the spike in volume of shipments, because to grab a stat that I loosely remember from Shopify, they were saying essentially the traffic they were anticipating, the online traffic they were anticipating in 2030, it happened during COVID. And with that online traffic comes increased purchases and increased shipments. So we've absolutely experienced delays with the carriers, understandably so. And there's been lost packages. There's been packages that have been delayed for weeks on end. The way we try to mitigate that the best we can, along with eShipper's guidance, is to split the shipments as equally as possible through the various carriers, so to manage the volume. But for packages that get lost, we recognize that this is still an anxious time, and our product is supposed to alleviate anxiety, not accelerate it. A lot of times when too much time has elapsed between the shipment, we will actually cover the cost and ship a new product to that person, so that when the carrier does recover our package, it's sent back to us. That's because we really want to help people and drive down their anxiety, and that's our main focus.
And well, for both of you here, for Gravid and Sezzle, when it comes to thinking about the returns policy, you're both dealing with merchants on a day-to-day basis. How have you dealt with that, and have you had to adapt it in any way that you did before because of the huge explosion in new orders coming in? So
I can talk about what we did. So when COVID started, we knew, and I think most customers empathized, that there would be shipping challenges. So we had put messaging in our email confirmations to say that if you do experience a delay, just kind of almost like a chill out. Don't start putting in complaints and things like that. And I think most people have been understanding of that. It's interesting because we work with some merchants that have noticed with Sezzle transactions a return rate that's way less than their other payment methods. And I think it's because it's the idea that they're breaking it up into 4 payments over 6 weeks. It doesn't feel like they've paid for it all up front. So so we've done a few things to address those challenges internally.
Okay. Fantastic. Fahad, Omar, what have you seen? Did you already have really good processes for returns, or did you have to change it up a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm sure as you're very familiar with our process, Imtiaz, we offer a 100-day money-back guarantee to our customers, and we've essentially maintained the same sort of policy that we've always had. We feel like the 100 days is certainly a long enough time that people could sort of figure out whether or not they feel like our blankets are helping us or helping them reduce stress, alleviate anxiety. And then in terms of the shipping, as Fahad touched on earlier, I think a key component is using a variety of carriers and sort of spreading your risk that way. And working with a partner like eShipper, it's allowed us to do that at very reasonable costs.
Okay, perfect. So I think one of the other questions that have come up is around HR. So I know there's a few people, a lot of people in my business actually, who are quite anxious about, when do we come back? We really want to get out the house. Are we allowed to come back? What are your policies for sanitation? And what are you guys doing to kind of keep everybody safe? Now, a lot of businesses who are adopting to online may need to have, productive face-to-face meetings, and also may need to have some of their staff members coming back in as retail opens up. What are some of the things you guys are doing as organizations to kind of, help that change? And is there any policies or procedures that you're doing yourselves? I'll go to Patrick first, because I know it's a much more inclined organization working together in an office compared to Gravid, who said that they were working from home already.
Yeah, I mean, so because we're in the tech space, the company adapted pretty well and pretty quickly. We are keeping a close eye on obviously what the governments are saying as far as return to work, but at the end of the day, for us, like core principle, how we're adapting to this is that core principles don't change. We continue to run our business with what we call our stakeholder approach, and that really starts with the employees. So, we talked about customer listening a couple of times on this call, but I think it's equally, sorry, my dog needs to get out of the room. This is the new normal, guys. But yeah, like it all starts with the employees. And I was recently speaking with a potential retailer partner, and he said, look, like, unless you guys are building rockets or something, most things can be replicated. And, although we believe that Sezzle has some unique advantages, we're not the only company doing what we do. So his advice for us was the number one competitive advantage needs to be customer experience. And I tie that back to employees because it all starts there. If we listen to our employees, if we give them what they need to make sure that they can do their jobs effectively, they're going to end up interacting with our customers in a positive manner, and they're going to build good products, and they're going to, talk about Sezzle positively to their family and friends. So even before COVID, during and after, we're trying to be the best employer that we can be, focused on outcomes. I think the question was from Syed was around how do you guys navigate through them? We at least my team, we do a video call every single day together as a team. We've got really, tangible and quantifiable outcomes, and just really making sure everyone's got what they need to do their jobs, and that to be sure that we're listening to them. So we've got what we call really an open forum for anyone to give feedback anytime they want without feeling that they're going to be singled out. And we're telling all of our employees as well that, if they don't feel comfortable going back into an office, and they're able to work effectively outside of the office, then we're totally okay with that.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for sharing all of that. I mean, we do have a question from Lori regarding Gravid blankets. So do you get many returns with a 100-day money-back guarantee? Do you have percentages that you can share? And I think one thing is also a big question is, during this period of time where people have been buying your product a lot more, has your returns gone up?
So there's two parts to that question. So the first one is, why do we have a 100-day return period? And then second, how does that impact the refund rate or the return rate? So the reason why we have a longer, like 100-day, effectively just over 3 months return period, is because our product, it takes time to adapt to it and to get comfortable with it. So we don't want to head out the gate and say, hey, here's this potentially lifestyle changing product that you're going to use 8 hours a night. And by the way, you've got 7 days to use it, or you've got 14 days to use it. If it doesn't work for you, send it back. So we established a really tight feedback loop with our customers. So we have 24/7 chat and email support. They can reach us anytime. And a lot of the people who purchase our product do live with anxiety, and they're trying to manage it the best that they can. So when we get a message at 3 or 4 in the morning, you're speaking to a real person. It's not a bot.
Yeah.
What they're saying, and what they're saying is, it's, hey, you know, this I'm feeling it. I like it, but you know, maybe it's too heavy, or maybe do I shift the weight to one side? Or how do I use this product? And really what we gather from that is they're trying to learn how to use the product, and it's going to take them time to adapt to that. So taking that feedback, we decided to extend the return period to 100 days to give more people a chance to get comfortable with the product.
And do you find you get a lot of returns because you have an extended period of time?
It actually lowers the return rate, because this product, some people it works instantly, and other people they need to warm up to it, but we need to give them the time to adapt.
I think that's a really good point you made there about, you know, it takes time to get used to it. Sometimes it takes time to get used to a purchase too, right? And being available at those times of the night obviously shows how dedicated you are to the brand and to your customers. Talk about some of the strategies you used during the crux of COVID-19 over the last 12 weeks, for example. Was there anything successful that you did differently that you found actually we need to change? We need to do something that's a little bit adopting something new compared to what you were already doing before.
Yeah, so this would be a good time to bring up our second company. So Fahad and I started a second weighted blanket company called Simple Sleep. And this is a company focused on making very affordable weighted blankets. So what we've seen during this time is a lot of people have been gravitating towards, you know, sort of the lower cost options there. And then at the same time, a lot of people are spending a lot more time on their social media platforms. So we've definitely, you know, increased our exposure on Facebook ads, doing a lot of retargeting, but at the same time also focusing on new audience. So, you know, our Facebook ad spend has certainly gone up. We've seen the returns come in, particularly with our Simple Sleep brand, which is, again, just like Gravid, it's filling that need of giving the sense of touch, the feeling of a hug, and at the same time, it's coming in at one of the lowest price points you would find in Canada. And then if we jump back to the Gravid side, you know, we've been working with Sezzle, and what we found is a lot of people are certainly willing to make the premium purchase, but we're, again, as we do with all of our marketing, we're trying to lower the barriers when it comes to purchasing our product and experiencing its benefits. So working with Sezzle, you know, with the 25% payment before you receive the product, that's certainly, again, reducing the barriers so that everyone can benefit from our products.
Yeah. So I think one of the things I want to touch on, and I'm just wary of the time. So I want to push to point number 6, because I think a lot of people in the space today are always thinking, how are we going to go against other people or larger organizations that have a much bigger budget than we do? And I think, you know, Sezzle comes in as a really good contender there, because you're providing them something that nobody else does in the market, especially from large retailers. So Patrick, from your perspective, how do you find you're able to help smaller businesses compete in the market? And also, what type of strategies would you give to somebody who's new to the market, coming in and thinking, hey, I'm actually going up against a behemoth company that's been in the space for such a long time? What do I do to kind of compete with them?
Yeah, so I'll try to hit 5 and 6 quickly. The 3 macro trends that's driving Sezzle and services like ours to be growing like the way that we are is one is the continuous growth of mobile commerce still and digital payments, particularly in the group of 35 and below. But even more so is the decrease in credit card usage in that same group that's 35 and below. And that's largely driven by high debt levels and particularly in the US, if you sell to the US, there's something called the Card Act, which prohibits credit card companies from advertising on college campuses. And that has all kind of resulted in the US, 30% of millennials don't even have a credit card. So, they're looking for a service like Sezzle to help them budget in a different way because they are approaching budgeting differently. So I'll move on to the next one, which is small companies and going against medium-sized or big ones. And I know today we're probably talking to mostly small and medium. So I'll say in general, there's one really big advantage that small companies have over large ones, and that's speed. It's speed of action, it's speed of decision. There's less red tape. Small businesses generally have the luxury of moving at the speed of their customers. The Gravid team saying they can take this feedback and turn it into product enhancements very quickly. So large companies typically can't do that. And really what that all means is that you can adapt faster. And look, like, we're never going to have answers as far as what works and what doesn't. So one of the strategies that I would encourage everyone to adopt is just a culture of testing. If you're on an e-commerce platform that Sezzle is directly integrated with, like a Shopify or a Magento, a WooCommerce, and a few others, just test the solution. Like on Shopify, setting up Sezzle literally takes about 30 minutes from sign up to going live. See if it resonates with your customers. There's not that much risk in doing so. And in the fraction of time that, as a smaller company, in the fraction of the time that it would take a large company to put together an ROI model, to build a deck, to sell it internally, like 3 levels up, you as a smaller company could have already tested and let the actual data speak for itself. So I really do encourage companies to spend at least a few hours a month evaluating solutions and different solutions that might be able to improve their customer or their employee experience, or help them just be more efficient in a bunch of different areas. A culture of testing, I think, is really, really important.
And I think that point number 6 is actually a statement. When you speak of it like that, it becomes a statement where even if you are starting up right now, or you've been a small business pre-COVID, you are actually now in a great position to compete with big corporations because, hey, you know what? You can make changes really quickly. Everybody's online, and just like Gravid and Simple Sleep, you can adopt different strategies online when it comes to marketing and find your audience using different technologies in different ways. So it's a great push together to be able to show people how to scale their businesses as the economy starts again, and kind of really getting people up and running. So we're at the 143 mark. I just want to go back and just, if we have people joining in a little bit later than when we started, this seminar is all about scaling businesses and how we can really help people understand what their options are as they get into the new economy, or as we say, the new norm. So a couple of questions that came up from Dushan, for example. What would be a more valuable use of my time and money? Is it customer retentions or gaining new customers? Fahad, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on that?
So his question is, what's a better investment of his time? Well, it's okay. So I can only look at that through the lens of our own product. I'm not sure what he's selling, but customer retention is really important for us because a few factors. So you invest a lot of ad dollars to acquire a new business, right? But eventually you want to build enough rapport and trust with your customers so that you start to grow the referral traffic and the referral business. And it sort of snowballs into this channel that generates new business. So customer retention implies satisfied customers, and that's really important to us because we went from investing all of our money into driving new traffic, people who never purchased with us before, and now we've had customers who've purchased their 3rd blanket set, their 4th blanket set, and that is a real channel that we've developed. But depending on what stage you are in your business, you first have to focus on filling what we say is the top of your funnel. Essentially, it's getting the people at the top of that funnel and driving them down to convert them into customers. So if you're just starting out, you definitely want to drive traffic first and acquire new business. And then over time, once you've developed your processes, your product, and your customer service channels, then you work on retention. So I would go new business, then retention.
Yeah, absolutely. And Patrick, anything to add to that?
Along those same lines, it's hard to answer this one because it depends on the product, whether it's B2B, B2C. whether it's one time or a subscription, or if there are upsell opportunities. Just too much variables. But here's what I'll say: it's generally always cheaper to keep a customer than to gain a new one. And if you do a really good job at keeping your customers happy, they will help you gain new customers as well. But I will offer a different point of view. I think in addition to thinking about retain or new, maybe another way to look at it is to be more local if it's related, because we just published a study or a survey results this morning, and we found that half of Gen Z respondents that we talked to are trying to support local businesses during the pandemic, and 60% of them actually said they will continue to want to shop locally post COVID-19. And other demographics were pretty similar. They were all between 50 and 60%. So there is a lean toward local, as well as being able to, like, a community type of thing. But I think instead of, I think there's a lot around there. And one of the things that Sezzle will be doing soon is we're going to be building and introducing a Canadian specific directory, a landing page where we're going to be focusing or we're going to be featuring all of our Canadian based retail partners, so that our Canadian shoppers can go and check out who they can support locally. That's Canadian.
Fantastic. Well, staying on the topic of scaling your business, we put together some tips for e-commerce sellers. And it's really just about thinking outside of the box, rather than, being within the same areas that you've been in all this time. So one of the things we talked about was learn about different market channels, because you may have other channels that you're not using today that you could actually sell a lot more on. So Gravid, for example, has this Shopify store, but does the product sell on Amazon? Does it sell on eBay? Is there other channels that might have a marketplace for you to be able to put your product on and have the right type of customers looking for it? Another one is, think about reaching out to a developer to help you create that online store on a different marketplace. Or actually, as Fahad and Omar earlier said, make some changes to your Google ads, be different. Don't just kind of leave things as they were, because as you scale, you have to think about the customers that have never kind of resonated to your product, for example. Diversify what you sell. So add essential items to your equipment or your product set, and experiment with different things. We've found that a lot of businesses that were in textiles have now gone into making masks. In fact, some of our biggest customers have actually been ordered by the government to start creating masks on behalf of the government of Canada. So some have kind of worked with the government on diversifying their portfolio, whilst actually others are just seeing a trend and saying, hey, you know what, instead of having a surgical mask, why don't I create something that people can wash? And hey, I'll go one step further. I'll make it with a Gravid or a Sezzle brand so that we can use it for hospitality and things like that at home. So I think, just diversify and think outside the box. Think about domestic suppliers, because you know what, we're going to get back into the winter months, and there is going to be lockdown at airports and things like that. And one of the things that we had first mentioned on one of the earlier Facebook Lives that we did was, if the airports lock down and China or Singapore or India can't actually send you the product that you sell in Canada, you got to think about having a domestic supplier and changing the way you do things, even if it's just for a short term. So these are some of the things that you could take upon yourself and make sure that you're ticking off as part of your growth strategy. And I think Gravid touched on it earlier. Sezzle did the same, which is become more human, and it's all about communication. So customer service should be at the front line of everything you guys do. Think about that and ensure that that is something that clients see you as the leader in. We had a few questions earlier about declining industries and whether PPE was a boom now and it's just temporary, or if it's something that will sustain. I mean, nobody can say anything about that, to be honest with you. What we are finding in the market is, obviously, there is a huge need for it right now, and there are huge shortages of the product. However, it is something that's really, really important. So Omar, maybe you want to answer the last question, because I think it's specifically at you.
The question,
so the question is, where did Omar get his haircut? And I'm sure he will answer that very eloquently.
So luckily, I learned how to cut hair about 5 years ago, and I've been doing my own hair since then. So during this time, I have not seen any a lack of freshness in the hair.
Fantastic. Well, a little bit of humor is always worth the effort, right? So we planted that question for you, by the way. So a couple of other things that came up. I think this is a really, really good question. And Patrick, I'd like you to think about this one, which is, how long will this consumer buying trend last? If my business is based on a declining category, I'm not sure whether to keep persisting or change course at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I would say maybe you have a product that just needs to be marketed differently, or talk to a different group. Maybe there's a different application. But if it's in one of those trends like we talked about earlier, if you're in suitcases and you don't, and you don't have a huge, if you're in travel, I think travel is going to be hurting for a little bit. So I mean, I don't want to say that you're not going to sell any suitcases for the next year, but it's going to be hard. So maybe there's like maybe you can repurpose. Maybe it's like, and again, think about the cause and effect type stuff. If people are traveling more domestically, if they're going on more road trips with their families or RV trips, how do you adapt your product to be able to speak to those customers instead? Because you do have a unique advantage, which is you have expertise in that field. So you might be able to design something that will help in the new world. So that's what I'll say. I'm not sure if there's anything that's going to just be like completely dead.
I think that's a great answer, to be honest with you. And I think that there's parts of diversifying, there's parts of adopting and changing your product set to I'm hoping to travel locally or domestically soon. And obviously these are things that from a travel perspective I will need. However, I think some of the things that we had earlier mentioned in previous webinars was, think about your current content, the following that you have, and really work very closely with them. Build on who you already have as a target audience that you've worked with in the past, and start educating them on other things that are going on within the industry that they might have a need for your product. For example, the cottages and domestic travel. It's still going to happen, and people are still going to think about it, and you need to be top of mind when they start to do that. So having said that, I think there are certain questions here that came up that are around concerns that businesses may have. So first and foremost, I'm sure Gravid can touch on this a little bit more, but acquiring a new customer can cost anywhere from 5 to 25 times more than retaining an existing customer. How are you finding that?
It varies. It's tough. It's tough to quantify that because it's a physical product that's being sold, and you only spend as much acquiring a customer as you're willing to pay, if that makes sense, right? And if you want to measure it against the cost of retaining a customer, well, then you're starting to you're getting into measuring the lifetime value of that customer, and that requires a really long runway to measure and to see what makes sense, where you invest your money. So I'm not sure I have a good answer to that, but I would say I would take that stat with a grain of salt, the 5 to 25 times more, because you have to start from 0 to get to 1. So
I'd say on a high level, it's extremely important to make sure that your customers are staying satisfied, right? So once you've already spent the money on acquiring a customer or someone who's close to becoming a customer, it's very important to be able to, again, keep those lines of communication open. And once they've purchased from you, make sure that they're extremely happy. You've already spent that ad spend on them as a new customer. And what they're going to do for you is, they've had a great experience, even if that means going above and beyond, potentially, adding a handwritten note into a product that's shipped out, or if somebody has had a poor experience because of a carrier delay, perhaps giving them a freebie included in their order. Just a little small token goes a long way in creating a satisfied customer. And that customer is then going to speak to his or her friends, family, and over time, what you can see is if you really focus on making sure your customers are happy, you could see your overall cost of acquisition go down over time. Like we talked about earlier, it is expensive, typically more expensive to get a new customer than it is to retain one. But if you look at sort of the proportion that comes in from new audience versus referrals, if you can sort of build up that percentage of your customer base that comes through referrals over time, then your overall macro cost of acquisition will decrease over time.
Okay, so we'll go into some questions really quickly, and we have 5 minutes on clock left, so we'll try and get through these as quickly as possible because we have a really nice slide at the end. So how do I ensure safety of my staff and customers? I think if you're in retail, you need to rationalize your product. You need to limit your working hours and kind of ensure that you have only a certain amount of people coming in and out at any one time. I recently had a similar thing at Rogers. I had to go into a Rogers store to return a modem, and they would only allow one person in at a time. I had to buzz myself in and so on and so forth. So it's just about thinking about, the retail side of it. From an online retailer who might be an e-commerce business like Sezzle, for example, a lot of people are working from home. So if you're keeping them home, that's a great idea, but ensure that you have the right communication tools around you so that you can deal with your people in, day out. How do I manage cash flow and inventory? Maybe Fahad, you want to touch on that quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So managing inventory has always been sort of a challenge because there's this discipline. It's called demand planning, and essentially what it is you take a look at your sales and then you try to project into the future what those sales are going to look like depending on how your business, if it's scaling this way, I don't know what way my hand's going, but if it's up and to the right or if it's kind of just plateauing. So you have to take all of this information and you got to apply to like these predictive models to get your inventory. So we do that the best that we can. It's not an exact science. But once we figure out how quickly our business is scaling, we have a ratio to apply to the sales of like year over year. So if last year we did this much, we know we're growing by this much. So we know we have to order this much in advance. And we also know how much we need to order and how much lead time our manufacturing team needs to get all of the inventory ready so that we don't go into back order. Imtiaz, as you know, it's been a constant challenge for us, and I don't think we've nailed it yet, but we've definitely gotten better at managing it.
Good, it's good advice.
And the more data you have, right? During our first year, we were having a very tough time calculating demand because there is a level of seasonality to every product, ours included. And when you don't have a full year of data to go off of, it's very hard to do that planning. So we feel like we've gotten better at it over time. But certainly during the COVID pandemic, we saw a spike that was unprecedented. Normally April or May would be sort of on a downwards trend compared to Q4, for example, when everybody's purchasing these as Christmas gifts or holiday gifts. But we almost saw like a Christmas-like spike in demand when it came to April this year. So when that happens, you definitely will run into inventory issues. It's even if you add a buffer to the amount of inventory you're keeping on hand, when you see a sort of exponential or unanticipated spike, then you're going to run into back order situations. And then we
have a problem, right?
Those as well.
It's a good problem to have, but it's a problem. We'll move on. I'll quickly answer question number 3, which is how do I tackle carrier delays leading to delayed deliveries? So I think Fahad and Omar touched on this earlier, but it's about having a plan of diversity when you have carriers. So work with a partner that can offer you different carriers at different times, not just one carrier all the time. And I think a lot of businesses feel like if they go with one carrier, they're going to get the best deal there. When you work with an organization like eShipper, for example, and others, you're able to take advantage of all the different carriers out there with one company's volume discount. So there are a lot of different opportunities to be able to get past the carrier delays and delayed deliveries. One question that came up really quickly is how big does my business need to be in order to use a fulfillment partner? I think Gravid and the rest of the companies that we work with, you don't have to be massive to begin with. You just have to have a projection, and you have to. It has to be a right time for you to spend that money as well. So from our perspective, we work with entrepreneurs who just have an idea, who haven't even launched a product, but they have pre-sales or pre-orders, and they know what their cost is going to be before they decide to jump into a relationship. How to tackle changes in customer behavior. Patrick, maybe touch on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'll go really quickly because I think we're over time. But I would say number one is we've talked about this kind of throughout the entire call, which is to understand the behavior, to understand the changes, and then test solutions that we think will help you solve in what those new behaviors or preferences or values are. And so really the message is take action, test it. If something works, do more of it. If it doesn't, stop doing it. And I think especially in e-commerce, technology has made it really feasible and easy to do these types of things. So just be flexible, be agile, and test.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we'll just show the last slide and we'll try and get through it as quickly as possible. We are out of time now. So I think immediate actions from the discussion that we've had today. Number one, engage your customers, be a human being. Customer service is everything, and people will remember this time and they'll remember how you dealt with them. Strengthen your supply chain and have a variety of options. So be domestic, be international, have suppliers and have a supply chain that can adapt quickly so that if things change down the line, you're not stopping your business. From a fulfillment perspective, use partners where necessary, do things yourself where you need to learn and adapt. And if you have new processes you want to put in place, understand them correctly, but think about that process and make sure it's as strong as possible. Projections that are coming in from a trends perspective, get serious about e-commerce because that's where the world is. Reimagine your business to be digital first. I think both Patrick and Fahad talked a little bit about that. And Omar really touched on how Gravid has been changing themselves to make sure that it's even more immediate. Check your digital performance and availability. I think every brand needs to really be strong at this part or have a partner that does that for them. And then think about pre-sales campaigns. I think one of the things that we've learned from a lot of businesses that have been successful is when you're starting a new brand or you have a new product, go into a pre-sales campaign and see how well it does before really investing in inventory and processes and so on and so forth, because it really gives you a lot of insight into what your customer looks like, who your customer is, where they're based, and so on and so forth. And I think one of the last things that we touched on is fulfillment is now one of the most important stages of a customer's journey. So as you get a lot of orders, how do you scale your business to be able to seamlessly deal with all those orders, all the returns, customer service, and so on and so forth. So with that being said, I really, really thank you both, or all three of you, for joining us today. You've kept your responses very, very concise. You've really added a lot of value, and I'd love to give you the ability to have a final say, a final comment before we close down for the day. So we'll start with Omar and work downwards.
Sure. So, it's been a pleasure speaking to everyone. I'm available on LinkedIn if somebody wants to send me a message. If you have any questions to follow up on, I certainly don't mind spending a bit of time answering any questions you may have. But, as Patrick sort of mentioned, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is testing, iterating very quickly, and sort of just making sure you're keeping those lines of communication open with your customers and your potential customers to make sure that you can do what people want and you can thrive that way.
Fahad, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So MTS, great moderating, by the way, man. Really good job. I had a lot of fun speaking to all you guys and to all the folks who tuned in. And I've got a soft spot in my heart for young budding entrepreneurs. I used to work at Shopify, so now I'm on the flip side of that. And happy to answer any questions for anyone who's trying to find product market fit or trying to figure out why they can't sell the units they're trying to sell. So also, you can hit me on LinkedIn. Would love to have a chat with anyone who's interested. Fantastic.
Patrick, your last
Yeah, same with me. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Send me a DM. They might put the link there, but Patrick Chan, Sezzle, easy to find. But yeah, anytime open to chatting with anyone, Sezzle or not Sezzle related. I realized I didn't really talk about Sezzle too much on this call. So if you have any questions about Sezzle or how we've been able to help 14,000 businesses that we work with, just drop me a note and we're happy to chat.
Thank you so much, guys. Happy Friday, and we will definitely be in touch. I'm sure everybody has a lot of questions individually for you guys. Omar, I'll hook you up with Mikhail for a fresh fade. But thank you for taking the time, guys. I think it's been a really knowledgeable session, and we really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your days. Have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you.
That was fun. Thank you.
Thank you guys for tuning in, and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.